When I was trapped in that elevator, I thought I was going to die. But what suffocated me the most wasn't the confined space. It was my own home. I came back expecting concern, but all I received were accusations, indifference, and neglect. I've spent my entire life working tirelessly, yet my husband, George, treats me like I don't exist. My son, Eric, does nothing but criticize me. My daughter-in-law, Megan, sees me as a free babysitter. Even my grandson, Owen, looks at me with disdain. In that moment, I finally understood. I was nothing in this house. The elevator malfunctioned during George's dance with his mistress. Eric was furious that I had inconvenienced him, making him late to pick up his son. When I limped home, injured and exhausted, the only thing they had to say to me was, "Go make dinner." Enough. I've endured a lifetime of this, but not anymore. This time, they're going to see that I am not someone they can trample over. When I threw down my apron and said, "I'm done," when I picked up my suitcase and declared, "I want a divorce," I saw the fear on their faces. I heard their desperate pleas. In that moment, I finally took control of my own life. My life is only just beginning. I was on my way to pick up my grandson, Owen, when the unexpected happened. The elevator malfunctioned as it reached the 8th floor. A loud bang echoed through the space, followed by a violent jolt. The sudden drop sent me crashing onto my hands and knees. My heart pounded in my throat, every nerve in my body screaming in terror. Then, just as abruptly, the elevator stopped. I let out a shaky breath, collapsing against the wall, my limbs drained of strength. Trapped with me was a young woman, already in tears, her face pale with fear. She scrambled to her feet and pressed the emergency call button. A voice answered quickly, reassuring us that help was on the way, urging us to stay calm. But how could we? The elevator was still dangerously suspended. No one knew what would happen next. A sinking sense of dread took hold of me. I pulled out my phone, desperate to make what could be my last call to George. The line connected, and before I could say a word, his irritated voice snapped. "What?" Fear had closed up my throat, leaving me unable to form a coherent sentence. "I'm in the middle of a dance. I don't have time for this." And with that, he hung up. I called back. He didn't answer. Panic rising, I dialed Eric next. I didn't know how long I'd be stuck here. I didn't know if I'd make it out alive, but one thing I hadn't forgotten. I was supposed to pick up Owen. This time, I cleared my throat before speaking. The moment the call connected, I quickly explained my situation, telling him not to worry and asking him to pick up Owen. His response, "You're completely useless." The line went dead again. I stared at my phone, my vision blurring. I had so much to say, so many things I wanted to leave behind, but I hadn't even been given the chance to say goodbye. Beside me, the young woman was calling her boyfriend. At first, he comforted her, but as time dragged on, his patience wore thin. "Babe, listen, I have work to do. I need to submit a report before the deadline. Don't worry, just wait for the rescue team, okay?" Her breath hitched. "If you hang up, we're breaking up." "Come on, sweetheart, don't be like that. You have to understand, I have responsibilities too. You'll be fine. Call me when you're out, okay? I'll come pick you up." "Don't you dare." The call ended. She clenched her jaw, wiped her tears, and without hesitation blocked his number. The elevator fell silent. I had heard every word. These young people had it so easy. If they were hurt, they could just walk away. George had hung up on me so many times, I'd lost count. Every time I called, his first words were always, "What do you want?" And every time, before I could say much of anything, he'd hang up. But today, what if this had been my final call? Would he have regretted it? I shook my head. No, he wouldn't. I refused to stake my life on his remorse. I would survive. I had to. "Ma'am, your knee, it's swollen," the young woman suddenly gasped. I snapped back to reality, glancing down and adjusting my pants. "It's fine. I hit it when the elevator dropped earlier." "Oh, okay, as long as you're all right. God, this is terrifying." "Don't worry, sweetheart," I murmured, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're going to be okay." Huddled together in that dim, claustrophobic space, we endured the agonizing wait, clinging to hope. At last, rescue came. By the time we were pulled out, night had fallen. I couldn't bring myself to take another elevator. Instead, I climbed the stairs, 10 flights, dragging my injured leg behind me. By the time I reached my apartment, my entire body was trembling from exhaustion, pain, and hunger. I barely had the strength to turn the doorknob. The moment I stepped inside, Eric's furious voice exploded in my ears. "Oh, so you finally decided to show up? Do you have any idea how much you screwed me over today?" I froze in the doorway. He didn't ask if I was okay, didn't notice the way I was barely standing. His rage only grew. "I had to take time off work to pick up Owen. Do you know what that cost me? A huge deal. Gone, stolen at the last minute. Do you have any idea how hard I work? And all I ask is for you to handle one small thing, to help me for once, and you can't even do that? What the hell is the value of you?" "Enough. Stop arguing. You're disturbing Owen while he's studying." Megan stepped out of Owen's room, her expression darkening the moment she laid eyes on me. She let out an impatient sigh. "Clara, hurry up and make dinner. It's late and we're all starving." I blinked, the words sinking in. Then, without a word, I turned and limped toward the kitchen. The entire time, George remained sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to the TV, completely indifferent to everything happening around him. He never even looked up. None of them noticed how pale I was. None of them saw my trembling legs, how I struggled with every step. And suddenly, a deep sense of injustice crashed over me. I had just been through something terrifying. I had been trapped in an elevator, helpless and afraid. I had barely made it home, exhausted and in pain. And yet, not a single person asked if I was okay. No one wondered if I was hurt, if I was scared. All they cared about was that I hadn't picked up Owen on time. My mind drifted back to the last time I had asked George for help. My rheumatism had flared up so badly I could barely walk. The pain was relentless, stabbing into my bones day and night. I had begged George to pick up Owen just for a few days, just until I could move without agony, but he refused. He had dance practice with our neighbor Vivian, and apparently that was more important. When Eric heard about it, he wasn't upset with George, he was upset with me. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. Dad spent years working far from home, breaking his back to provide for this family. He suffered for over a decade. Now that he's older, he deserves to rest. But you've never had a job. You've never experienced how hard it is to work, and now you're making excuses just to get out of something as simple as picking up Owen? That's beyond selfish." So I had gritted my teeth and done it anyway. I endured the pain. I limped through every school run, pushing myself until I had nothing left. But this time I had been trapped in an elevator. I physically couldn't be there, and Eric still never once thought to ask his father for help. He knew where George was. He knew George was dancing with his mistress, and yet he would rather take time off work himself than ask George to step in, because in this house, George was untouchable, and I was nothing but a maid, a servant who had given up everything for this family only to be treated like I was worth nothing. A lump formed in my throat, my eyes burning with unshed tears. For years, I had told myself I was used to this. George's cold indifference, Eric and Megan's constant demands, their sharp words that cut into me like knives. I thought I had learned to live with it, but tonight, something changed. Maybe it was the pain in my leg radiating all the way into my chest. Maybe it was the crushing weight of everything I had endured. Or maybe for the first time in my life, I finally realized the truth. I couldn't take it anymore. I wouldn't take it anymore. And I swore in that moment they would pay for every single thing they had done to me. "Is dinner ready yet?" George's impatient voice bellowed from the living room. I snapped back to reality, inhaled deeply, and then, without hesitation, threw the dishcloth aside and walked out. I didn't cook dinner. George frowned, clearly displeased. "You're so slow. Vivian's already been texting me to come dance. Forget it, I'll just skip dinner." Nah. With that, he got up, straightened his barely rumpled clothes, and pulled out his phone. As he strode toward the door, I'm coming. I'll be down in a second." His tone was light, almost eager. That was when Eric stepped out of his room, his face fresh and darkening. "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" I had had enough. "Whoever wants to eat can cook. I'm done." Megan, who had been lounging on the couch watching TV, jerked her head up, her voice turning sharp. "Clara, what kind of tantrum is this? Don't you care about your grandson? Owen has been saying he's hungry for ages," I scoffed. "And none of you thought to get up and make something yourselves? All you know how to do is sit there and demand." Megan puffed, arms crossed. "We don't know how to cook." Eric's temper flared. "Jesus, it's just a meal. You're really trying to blackmail us over this. Megan, grab Owen, we're eating out tonight." Megan shot me a glare before disappearing into Owen's room. Moments later, she emerged, taking his hand and raising her voice just enough for me to hear, "Come on, Owen. We're going to your favorite restaurant tonight." Owen's face lit up with excitement. He practically jumped for joy. "Yes, finally!" As he passed by me, he smirked and stuck out his tongue, a deliberate taunt. He had always hated my cooking, hated me. Every time I picked him up from school, he would throw a tantrum demanding ice cream, but his stomach had always been sensitive, and I had to control his intake. He resented me for it. I had tried so many times to make special treats for him, things that were fun and colorful, but nothing I did was ever good enough. The front door slammed shut, and just like that, the house fell silent, an eerie, suffocating stillness. I was alone. For a long moment, I just stood there numb. Then, slowly, I shuffled to the couch and sank down. I pulled up my pant leg and examined my knee. The bruises had deepened into a sickening shade of purple, and the swelling was even worse than before. I reached for the first aid kit, my hands trembling as I cleaned the wound. The sting was sharp, so sharp that tears silently slipped down my face. Once I was done, exhaustion crashed over me like a tidal wave. I didn't even make it to my bed. I passed out right there on the couch. I had no idea how much time had passed when the sound of the front door slamming woke me. George had returned. The first thing he did was start rummaging through the cabinets. "Where's the first aid kit?" I froze. My breath hitched. Was this it? Had he finally noticed my injury? My eyes burned with an embarrassing, involuntary hope. Maybe, just maybe, he had seen my swollen knee. Maybe he cared. Megan hesitated before answering. "I think it's under the TV stand." Eric frowned, stepping closer. "Dad, what happened? Did you get hurt? Why do you need the first aid kit?" George's reply was casual, almost dismissive. "Oh, it's not for me. Vivian twisted her ankle while we were dancing. It's all swollen, looked pretty painful." In that instant, it was like a bucket of ice-cold water had been dumped over my head. All that foolish hope, gone. I should have known better. That fleeting warmth I had felt shattered like a fragile glass, slipping from my grasp and smashing into pieces on the floor. A cold numbness spread through me, seeping into my bones. It felt like I had fallen into an ice-cold abyss. George grabbed the first aid kit and bolted for the door, as if every second Vivian waited was sheer agony for him. Then, just as he reached the exit, he paused, turned back, and without the slightest hesitation, gave me an order. "Make some chicken soup tomorrow. Big batch. I'm bringing it over to her. She lives alone, and now that her foot is injured, she won't be able to cook for herself." And with that, he walked out without so much as a backward glance. Eric barely reacted, just pulled out his wallet and carelessly tossed a few bills onto the table. "Mom, go to the market early tomorrow and buy the freshest chicken and vegetables. After you drop Owen off at school, start simmering the soup. Let it cook longer. It'll taste better that way." I stared at them, my mind blank. It wasn't that they didn't know how to care for someone. They just never thought to care for me. The image of the young woman from the elevator flashed in my mind. She had been ignored once by her boyfriend, and she had immediately chosen to walk away. And yet, what about me? I had endured a lifetime of far worse neglect, far deeper wounds, and I had never once considered letting go. Because from the moment I was born, I was taught to endure, to obey, to sacrifice. I was once young, naive, foolishly believing that marriage would be my refuge, But after marrying George, I realized I had merely stepped into another prison. He was quick-tempered, cruel, impatient. The slightest inconvenience would send him into a rage. Sometimes his anger was just words. Other times it was worse. But I never left because I had nowhere to go. I had been raised in a strict, conservative family, forced to drop out of school at a young age. I had no education, no job, no skills except for housework. So I stayed. If dinner wasn't to his liking, I got yelled at. If the house wasn't spotless, I got yelled at. If the baby cried too much, I got yelled at. Once, when I couldn't take it anymore, I ran home to my mother sobbing, but before the day was even over, my family sent me right back. A married daughter doesn't return home. No matter how wrong you feel, you swallow it. So I swallowed it. I learned how to cook. I learned how to clean. I learned how to endure. I learned how to become invisible. Then George left off to chase business deals in another city. He was gone for over a decade, and I stayed behind, raising Eric alone, taking care of his aging mother, holding the household together day after day, year after year. Then, when Eric got married and had his own family, he generously moved George and me into the city. He called it letting us enjoy life. The old neighbors back home envied me. "Your son is so successful. George must have mellowed out now that he's older. He doesn't hit you anymore, does he? You finally have your good days ahead." Good days? George ignored me. Eric ordered me around. Megan treated me like free labor, and Owen, my own grandson, hated me. I had given everything to this family, and in return, I was nothing more than a servant. I was done. I had sacrificed enough. Was I supposed to spend the rest of my days like this, enduring their cold indifference, their dismissive cruelty, their absolute lack of respect? And suddenly, the voice of that girl in the elevator echoed in my head. I want to break up. No, I didn't want to just break up. I wanted a divorce. Divorce. I want a divorce. The moment those words left my lips, it felt like 1,000 slams had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in decades, I stood tall. Eric's head snapped up, his eyes widening in shock. "You what? What did you just say?" I took a deep breath, met his gaze, and repeated slowly, deliberately. "I said I want a divorce. I'm done serving this family of ungrateful parasites. I'm moving out. I refuse to waste another second of my life taking care of you people." Eric's face darkened, his voice turning sharp. "Mom, have you lost your mind? You're too old to be talking about divorce. Aren't you embarrassed? Do you know how humiliating this will be? People will laugh at us." Megan rolled her eyes, scoffing. "Oh, Clara, is this menopause talking? What are you even mad about? Vivian? She's just Dad's dance partner. You're really making a scene over nothing." Eric's expression shifted, realization dawning. "Wait, this is about Vivian? Mom, you cannot be serious. They just danced together and you want a divorce over that? That's ridiculous." I shook my head, my voice unwavering. "I don't care what you think. I've made up my mind." A strange calmness settled over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking permission. I wasn't waiting for approval. I had spent a lifetime suppressing my own needs, no more. My heart pounded, not in fear, but in exhilaration. I had never felt more alive. I turned, grabbed my phone, and dialed George. The line connected. He didn't even bother with the greeting. "What now?" he snapped, impatient as ever. I barely had time to speak before he hung up. Didn't even give me a chance. Perfect. A bitter laugh bubbled in my throat as I turned and strode into my room. I grabbed a suitcase and started packing. Eric finally realized I was serious. His face twisted in panic as he fumbled for his phone, dialing George with shaky hands. "Dad, you need to come home. Mom's lost her mind. She wants a divorce." As I packed my things, I realized how pathetically little I owned. I had spent my whole life saving, sacrificing, never once indulging myself, and now, as I stood here preparing to leave, it hit me. After all these decades, all I had to my name were a few faded, threadbare clothes. I closed my eyes, swallowing the bitter lump in my throat. From the nightstand, I pulled out my bank book and personal documents, stuffing them into my travel bag along with my clothes. When I zipped the bag shut, there was still a gaping, empty space inside. This was everything I had, my entire life reduced to a half-filled suitcase. Done packing. Eric leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at his lips, murmuring dismissively. "When is George coming home?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Eric shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "No idea. Vivian needs him right now. He can't leave her side." My hands clenched into fists. Eric clicked his tongue. "Come on, Mom, drop the act." His smirk deepened, laced with condescension. "This whole tantrum, it's just a desperate ploy to drag Dad back from Vivian, isn't it?" His gaze was pure scorn. "Mom, look at yourself. You're not some young girl competing for a lover's attention. Do you even realize how pathetic you look right now?" I stared at him. This was my son, a child I had raised with my own hands, a boy who had once been so sweet, so kind. No, I didn't recognize him at all. But Eric wasn't finished. His words grew sharper, each one a dagger. "Mom, you're seriously overreacting. They're both old. What could possibly be going on? Are you really making a scene over this? Vivian just lost her husband. Her kids live far away. He's alone, Mom, alone. Isn't it normal for neighbors to help each other out?" He exhaled loudly like he was the only rational person in the room, and honestly, you should be grateful. Do you have any idea how many people wish their kids would take them in and care for them, and here you are throwing a fit over nothing? His tone shifted, patronizing. "All right, Mom, that's enough. Just drop it. This is getting embarrassing. I couldn't listen anymore." My body moved before I could think. Frick. My palm collided with his face. The slap rang through the room. Eric stumbled, back eyes wide in shock. I let out a cold, humorless laugh. Grateful. I took a step forward, locking eyes with him. "Do you really think I should be grateful for spending every single day cooking, cleaning, and waiting on a bunch of grown adults who refuse to lift a finger? Do you think I should be grateful for dragging my aching legs to pick up Owen from school, only to come home and serve you dinner like a damn maid? Do you think I should be grateful for almost dying in an elevator only to come home and be scolded because I inconvenienced you?" I spat on the floor. "Grateful my ass. You've bled me dry for years, and you still think I owe you more. You still think I should keep being your servant." Dream on. Eric touched his stinging cheek, his expression twisting into something dark for the first time in my life. I saw it. Hatred. He hated me. This was the first time I had ever laid a hand on him, and yet after everything I had done for him, everything I had given up for him, this was what it took to finally get a reaction. Not love, not guilt, just hate. How tragic, how utterly, pathetically tragic. Madge C. Eric's temper snapped, his voice rose, shaking with fury. "What the hell have you ever done for me besides cooking and babysitting?" He whirled toward the window, jabbing a finger at the city below. "Look at my friends. Look at their parents. Every single one of them helps their kids. Buy a house, a car, something." His teeth clenched, voice venomous. "But you!" His hand shot out, pointing. "Straight at me. You're the worst. At least Dad bought me a car. What the hell have you ever given me? Have you ever worked a single day in your life? Have you ever made a cent on your own? No, you can't even support yourself." His lip curled in disgust. "You're nothing but dead weight, a burden." His voice dropped, dripping with pure contempt. "So what gives you the right to stand there and lecture me?" My whole body trembled with rage as I raised my hand and slapped Eric across the face again. "You ungrateful bastard!" His head snapped to the side, his eyes widening in disbelief, but I didn't care. A lifetime of suppressed fury, buried pain, and silent endurance erupted all at once. "You were sick all the time when you were little, constantly in and out of the hospital. Your grandmother said you were a burden, a waste of money. She refused to pay for your treatment. Do you remember who carried you on my back, running door toto, begging the neighbors for money just so I could get you the medical care you needed it? Was me. Now you stand here and look down on me for not having a job, for not making money. Do you have any idea why I never worked when you were 3 years old? George, sister told me to send you away to let you live with your grandmother so she could take me to the city to earn a living. But how could I, your grandmother, treated you like a nuisance? She barely gave you enough to eat if I had left you with her. You wouldn't have survived, and now you dare to call me a burden. I let out a bitter, hollow laugh. When you were little, you were the burden I had to carry every single day. But did I ever resent you? Did I ever blame you? No, I loved you. You were my whole world. Eric's face drained of color. His lips parted, trembling like he wanted to say something, but no words came out because he didn't remember. He had spent so many years blaming me, looking down on me, treating me like the family's unpaid maid. Never once did he stop to think about everything I had done for him. I took a shaky breath, wiped my face, and forced my voice to stay calm. Yes, your father worked away from home for over a decade, and you think he had it hard. But do you know that for the first 10 years he never sent home a single penny? Do you know that it was me who kept this family afloat? Do you know that every single meal you ate, every piece of clothing you wore, every time you got sick, it was all on me? You think he suffered. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Did you ever stop to wonder what about me? And finally, the tears came. Had held them back for so long, but they poured down now, carrying decades of exhaustion, heartbreak, and pain. Eric's mouth opened and closed. He was choking on his own words, struggling to speak. Mom, he reached for me, but I stepped back. His hand hovered in the air. Stunned for the first time, real panic flickered in his eyes, but this time I wasn't going to soften. I wiped my tears, steadied my breathing, and spoke in a voice so calm it almost sounded cold. Eric, I owe you nothing. I have given you everything. You have no right to judge me, no right to blame me. Eric's entire body trembled, his face, twisted in pain, in something almost like regret. After a long silence, he finally spoke, his voice low, hoarse. Mom, I was wrong. I was selfish. I shouldn't have treated you like that. I'm sorry. I paused, Eric apologizing, but strangely, I felt nothing. I had been disappointed too many times, and sure enough, the very next moment he grabbed my hand, his voice suddenly gentle. Coaxing Mom, let's just take a step back. Okay, Latoon, forget about tonight. We can go back to how things were and we'll live happily as a family again. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Let me guess, you still think this is my fault that I'm the one making a fuss. Eric flinched, caught off guard, and no, Mom, that's not what I meant. You don't have to explain. I cut him off my tone, calm, but ice cold. Your father never cared about this family when he was young. He was always too busy helping other people, and now that he's older, he's still the same. He barely speaks to me, but he's running around playing caretaker for another woman. Eric, I'm exhausted. Eric immediately shook his head, rushing to defend George. Mom, you're overthinking things. It's just medicine. It's just being neighborly. It's not a big deal. Deal? I stared at him for a long moment, then let out a soft, cold chuckle. Is that so, then? Leeton, go see for ourselves. George and Vivian were never just dance partners. I had noticed months ago the stolen glances, the lingering touches, and now that. Vivian's husband was gone. They weren't even trying to hide it. Divorce. Of course, I was getting a divorce, but I wasn't leaving quietly. Vivian lived on the first floor. As I peered through her floor-to-ceiling window, I was met with a scene so disgustingly intimate that I almost laughed under the dim golden light. Vivian sat on the couch with her leg draped over George's lap, playing the role of a helpless, fragile damsel. George knelt before her, carefully applying medicine to her ankle like he was handling a priceless artifact. His face was so gentle, so focused, as if he weren't the same man who had ignored me for years. My eyes narrowed, lips curling into a cold sneer. So this was neighborly concern. Kimum, you're overreacting. Eric, standing beside me, waved a dismissive hand. His tone was lazy and different. Look at him. His face is serious. There's nothing inappropriate going on. It's late. Was this little investigation really necessary? Shut up. Keep watching. My voice was ice. George finished applying the medicine. When Vivian winced in pain, he leaned down and blew gently on her ankle. Eric let out an awkward chuckle, but his voice wavered. Well, blowing on a wound is pretty normal, right? He trailed off because the next second, George pulled Vivian into his arms and kissed her, like a match striking dry wood. The tension ignited instantly. Vivian made a half-hearted attempt to push him away, her voice as soft as a feather. Close the curtains. George hesitated about to get up, and that's when he saw me. Our eyes met, the air froze. A blinding flash of light. My phone's flash was on. Oops, my bad, left. The flash on, a loud, familiar voice rang out behind me. Wait! That voice. I turned around and nearly burst out laughing. It wasn't just Tracy. She had brought the whole squad. I had only told her, but somehow an entire gang of old friends had tagged along. These were women who usually complained about bad knees and aching backs, yet the moment they smelled gossip, they had outrun a pack of greyhounds. 7 of them standing in perfect formation, cameras ready inside. Vivian screamed and kicked George off of her with the exact same foot she claimed was too injured to walk. Perfect ran panicked, his voice cracked as he turned to Tracy. Tracy, what are you doing here? What did you just record? Tracy smirked, planting her hands on her hips. What do you mean? We were just out for an evening stroll. That's normal, right? We didn't do anything. Eric, now completely losing it, lunged toward her phone. Let me see that. You can't just record people. Tracy dodged effortlessly, clutching her phone like a prize. Hands off, my knees. Are bad if you hurt me. I'll sue you for assault, one of the other women piped up. Don't worry, ladies, I already sent it to the group chat. Whoever has a phone, check for yourself. Eric turned ghost white. Delete it now, you crazy old bat. The old ladies burst into laughter too late, and just then George stormed out face thunderous. What the hell are you lunatics doing? Tracy cued her hands around her mouth and hollered, Everyone look! The cheating husband has arrived within seconds. Windows up and down the block flew open. Dozens of nosy neighbors peeked out. Tracy pointed dramatically at George, her voice booming like a police siren. This is George and that's Vivian. Her husband hasn't even been dead a few months and she's already tangled up with a married man. And guess what? We got it all on video. Anyone who wants to see, come take a look. Shut your mouth. You're talking nonsense, George. Roared, but Tracy wasn't backing down. Oh, I hit a nerve. Huh? Why so defensive? We just caught you red-handed what? We're not even allowed to talk about it now. George tried to step forward, but he never stood a chance, and the 7 women closed in surrounding him like a pack of wolves, one of them sneered, voice dripping with sarcasm. Ladies and gentlemen, this is George and his dear Vivian. They thought they could get away with their little romance, but forgot to shut the curtains. It's like they wanted an audience. Another one chimed in, eyes locked on Vivian. Vivian, your husband is barely cold in his grave and you're already in another man's arms. That's some Olympic-level speed if you love performing so much. Why not do it out on the street? We'd be happy to applaud. Actually, ladies, I noticed them months ago. They've been sneaking around for a while. A collective gasp, and then, oh my God, do you think Vivian's husband died from the shock of their affair? Jesus, they're worse than I thought. George's face was livid. Vivian, humiliated, looked ready to faint me. I just stood there, arms crossed, enjoying the show. The whole fiasco finally ended when the police arrived. George looked like a complete mess. His clothes torn, his hair missing a chunk, his entire body disheveled and humiliated. The whole neighborhood had witnessed the spectacle by now. Everyone in the community was talking about it. I stood at a distance watching him stomp around in a blind fury, completely unhinged, and for the first time in years, felt satisfied, pure, unfiltered satisfaction. It was glorious. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. George sat in the living room, his face dark as an impending storm. The moment he saw me, his entire expression twisted with rage. You crazy was this. You're doing? I met his fury with a calm, cold smile. Yes, it was me. So what? His entire body shook with anger. You venomous woman. He slammed his fist onto the table, his roar filling the room. I'm your husband and you dare do this to me. Eric came in behind. Him looking like he had completely lost his mind. He was breathing hard, his hands in his hair, eyes filled with pure frustration. "Mom, what the hell do you want?" His glare burned into me full of disappointment and blame, as if he was the one being humiliated no matter what happens. "You should have kept it private. You don't air dirty laundry in public. Do you have any idea what you've done? How am I supposed to face people now? Do I even have a shred of dignity left? I didn't even look at him instead." Turned to George, pointing straight at him. "Why don't you ask him that question? HEK, the one who climbed on top of Vivian in full view of everyone. HEK, the one who disgraced you." Eric's face froze. George, on the other hand, turned a dangerous shade of red, his voice rising to a furious bellow. "You're insane, a complete lunatic." He jabbed a finger toward the door, his voice trembling with rage. "Divorce. I want to divorce. Course right now, get out of my house. Take your and leave right now for the first time." That night, I felt a wave of relief. Finally, I had been waiting for this moment. I had worried that George would drag this out, refused to let me go, trap me in this prison, but now he was throwing me out himself. Perfect. I didn't say another word. I simply turned, walked to my room, and grabbed my already packed bag. I had been ready to leave hours ago. I slung it over my shoulder, full, prepared to walk out of that house forever, but just as I reached the door, George blocked my way. "Stop right there," his narrowed eyes locked onto my bag, and something vicious flickered in them. "Put that down." His voice was sharp, dripping with malice. "You're not taking a damn thing. Everything in this house was bought with my money. You leave empty-handed." That sentence, that absolute audacity. I laughed, actually laughed. It was a slow, cold, deliberate laugh. Then, without a word, I placed my back down. Eric let out a small sigh of relief, thinking I had given in, but then I walked into the kitchen. A second later, I strode back, out holding a knife, a long, gleaming kitchen knife. Eric's face went ghost white. George took an instinctive step back. I gripped the handle firmly, my gaze sharp and deadly. "Listen carefully. George, if you won't let me live in peace, then we're going down together for a second time." Seemed to rewind decades, once when I was young and desperate. I had held a knife just like this, facing off against someone who tried to hurt me and my child. No, I was standing in my own home, holding it against my own so-called family. Eric panicked, stepping between us, his voice shaking. "Mom, calm down. We can talk this out. Don't do anything crazy. Calm down." I lifted the knife slightly, just enough for the blade to catch the light. "Did you all think I was just some punching bag? Did you think that just because I spent a lifetime enduring that, I would never fight back? Even a clay figurine has fire in its core. You have all pushed me too far." George finally showed fear. He took another step back, still muttering curses, but his voice wasn't as strong as before. "You crazy old hag." I narrowed my eyes. "George," my voice was low, cold and deadly sharp. "I don't have a mistress to run to. I have nothing to lose. So if you think you can keep pushing me, you'd better start sleeping with one eye open." George's entire face drained of color, his breath hitched, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. He tried to act tough, but the terror in his eyes was undeniable. "Get out! Take your damn bag and get out!" Eric stood there stunned, his expression unreadable. He stomped his foot, his frustration boiling over. "Mom, why did it have to come to this? Why did you push things this far?" I turned my voice calm and firm, "Because you all pushed me first, and with that I walked out the door and never looked back after my divorce from George. He wasted no time trying to humiliate me. The very next day, he brought Vivian into our home as if nothing had happened. Not only that, but they planned to throw a grand party like they were celebrating a damn wedding, but their joy didn't last long. The following morning, I hired someone to leave a special message on their doorstep, a very public blessing, and the results were immediate. Vivian saw my little gift and screamed so loud the entire neighborhood turned to watch the scene unfold. Within half an hour, they canceled the party. They didn't even dare step outside, but of course to comfort his precious Vivian. George went and hired a maid to make sure she never had to lift a finger. Now Vivian had truly become the queen of the household. I spent the rest of the day on the phone with my old friends, gossiping and laughing. Some felt bad for me, saying it was a shame that those two scumbags got away with everything. Tracy, of course, was the most furious. If I were you, I wouldn't have given up the house so easily. I'd stay there just to piss him off for the rest of his miserable life. Her words made me chuckle. Who's really going to suffer in the end? That remains to be seen. But honestly, why waste my life on George anymore? I had better things to do. Then Tracy sent another message. Clara, why don't you come live in my old house? I'm never going back there, and it's just sitting empty anyway. I knew she meant well, but I insisted on paying rent. After a bit of back and forth, she finally gave in and accepted a symbolic amount just to ease my conscience. And just like that, I left behind the place that had suffocated me for years and started over. Tracy's old house was in a quiet little town surrounded by breathtaking scenery. On my first day there, I cleaned the house from top to bottom, even took the time to till a small patch of land near the yard, planning to visit the market the next day for flowers and vegetable seeds. By the time I finished, my whole body ached, but for the first time, it was a good kind of exhaustion. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I opened my eyes, glanced at the sky, and instantly bolted out of bed. I'm late! I need to wake Owen up. He's going to be late for school! I rushed to the kitchen, ready to start breakfast, then suddenly froze. Wait, where am I? I looked around, slowly realizing I don't have to take Owen to school anymore. I was free, truly, completely, finally free. For years, mornings had been a daily battle. Owen refused to get up. I nagged. He dragged his feet. We barely made it to school before the bell rang. I never even had a moment to breathe, always exhausted, always rushing, always worn down. But now I could slow down, and for some reason, that realization made me want to cry. It didn't take long for me to settle into my new life, tending flowers, growing vegetables, enjoying the sun. My days were peaceful and quiet, and then Linda arrived, my new neighbor. She was around my age and, strangely enough, always seemed to show up right when I was cooking. One day, she walked over acting as if nothing was strange and announced, Clara, I can't cook. Mind if I join your meals? I'll cover the grocery costs. I didn't refuse. Cooking for two wasn't much different than cooking for one, and honestly, it was nice to have company. Before long, we became inseparable. Linda was bold, funny, and completely unfiltered. Every evening after dinner, we took long walks, laughing and gossiping like two old troublemakers. Life was perfect, until today. My phone rang. Eric. I frowned, hesitated, then picked up. Mom. His voice was choked with emotion, thick with regret. Can you come back? There was a tremble in his voice like he was about to cry. I paused, then I laughed. I wasn't surprised to see Eric's name pop up on my phone. Tracy had already given me the full report. Ever since I left, their lives had fallen into complete chaos. Megan and Eric were constantly fighting, and the root of their fights? Money, the mortgage, the car payments, Owen's expensive piano lessons. It was all suffocating them, and now, on top of everything, they had to cover the cost of George's precious maid for Vivian. Megan couldn't take it anymore. She suggested that Vivian start pulling her weight since she was now George's new wife. But Vivian? A housewife? A caretaker? She lasted exactly one day. While mopping the floor, she accidentally twisted her ankle and immediately took to bed rest for 5 whole days. George was devastated. He practically worshipped her bedside, waiting on her hand and foot. Megan, on the verge of a breakdown, didn't dare lash out at George, so she took it out on the maid instead. The poor woman lasted a few days before she finally snapped, storming out of the house with her suitcase, cursing all the way down the street. You people are a goddamn curse! I've never seen a family as toxic as yours! Words spread fast. Soon enough, the entire neighborhood started avoiding George's family like the plague. With no maid left, the responsibility of picking up Owen fell to Vivian. But did she actually care about him? Of course not. He wasn't her grandson. In fact, she still held a grudge against Megan, so she did what any spiteful stepmother would do. She used Owen to get back at Megan. She spoiled him rotten. One day, she encouraged him to eat 5 fried chicken legs and 3 ice creams in one sitting. That night, he ended up in the emergency room, curled up in pain, screaming on the hospital bed before being rushed into surgery. Megan, finding out what had happened, completely lost it. She and Vivian got into a full-blown screaming match at the hospital. Neither one backed down, their shouting so loud that even the nurses were too scared to intervene. George, in a panic, tried to break them apart, and in the chaos, Vivian shoved him. He went flying down the stairs and broke his stupid leg. That night, their happy family shattered completely. George, now stuck in a wheelchair, sat there seething with hatred, glaring daggers at Vivian. When Tracy told me this last night, I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my dessert. Karma is a beautiful thing. But Eric had no idea I already knew, so when I picked up his call, he immediately launched into a dramatic sob story. "Mom, Owen is in the hospital. He was rushed there last night. He just got out of surgery. Poor Owen, he's just a little kid. How could he go through something like this?" I stayed silent, listening. Eric paused, realizing I wasn't reacting. He quickly switched tactics. "Mom, can you come back, please? Just for Owen? Even if you and Dad are divorced, you'll always be Owen's grandma. He's been calling for you in his sleep. Mom, we need you. Please come home." As I listened, my brows furrowed. Eric was so full of it, I could barely stand it. Since when did he ever need me? This wasn't about Owen. This was about them needing a free babysitter again. Same old tactics, same old tricks. I snapped. "Do you seriously think I'm that stupid? You miss me? You need me? Don't make me laugh. You just ran out of people to exploit. You're the ones who invited Vivian into your home. Now you're paying the price. Didn't expect it to go this way, did you? Well, too bad. This is your mess, you clean it up. And George? He's only in a wheelchair? Damn shame. He should have broken his neck instead. Next time he actually drops dead, give me a call. I'll gladly come back to attend his funeral. Goodbye." Then, without hesitation, I hung up. Hanging up the phone, I let out a long breath as if I had finally shrugged off a mountain of weight from my shoulders. Linda had been watching the whole time. Now she leaned back, arms crossed, a satisfied grin on her face. "I was half afraid you'd go soft on him," she admitted. "I was this close to snatching your phone and cussing him out myself." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Relax, I haven't lost my mind just yet." "Seh." Linda let out a small sigh, her expression shifting into something more distant. "You never asked me why I came here alone," she said, "but I'm guessing you've already figured it out." She smiled, but it wasn't a happy one. I nodded. "You went through something like me, didn't you?" Linda hesitated, then shook her head. "Yes and no." Now that she had an opening, she slowly began to tell her story. Linda came from a coastal town in Maine, a place known for fresh seafood and lobster. But her husband? He was no hard-working fisherman. "He always called himself a fisherman," she scoffed. "But if I counted how many times he actually went out to sea in a year, I wouldn't even need both hands." They were dirt poor. She had no choice but to leave town and work in the city, busting her ass for years to save up enough money. Eventually, she was making more than her husband, but did he appreciate it? Did he thank her? Instead, he resented her. He said, "What kind of man lets his wife provide for the family? It's humiliating." But did he ever ask himself why he refused to get a real job? Still, she stuck it out. She put her son through school, paid for his wedding, even helped raise his kids. She thought finally maybe she could rest. Then she found out her so-called best friend had been sleeping with her husband for years, and the worst part? Her whole family knew, even her son. When the truth came out, she thought, at the very least, her son would stand by her. He was wrong. Just like Eric had sided with George, her son took his father's side. "You were always working," he told her. "You were never around. Becca was the one who actually took care of us." Linda had collapsed from the shock and heartbreak, so sick she was hospitalized for 2 months. When she finally recovered, she didn't hesitate. She took her share of the money and left, and that's how I ended up here. She finished with a humorless chuckle. Then she looked at me, something bitter but determined in her eyes. "You know what, Clara?" she said, voice quieter now. "I worked my whole damn life to provide for them, and in the end, what did I get? I bought my son a house. I paid for his kids, and yet he still blamed me for not being there enough. She laughed coldly. When I worked, I was neglectful. When I didn't work, I was useless. She exhaled, shaking her head. Sometimes I think no matter what we do, we're always in the wrong. I reached over and squeezed her shoulder gently. No, the problem isn't us, it's them. If the family is broken, then we build a new one. I smiled at her, my voice warm. Look at us. We're living together, taking care of each other, and we're happier than ever. Isn't this what real family should feel like? Linda blinked, stunned for a moment, then her expression brightened. You're right, we should be living for ourselves. Then suddenly her eyes lit up with excitement. But you know what, Clara? We've rested enough. It's time to start making money. I frowned, caught off guard. Money? Linda nodded firmly. You're amazing at cooking. Why don't we start a food channel? We'll film your recipes and post them online. I hesitated, feeling unsure. People pay for that? Of course they do. Don't worry, I've already looked into it. You just cook, I'll handle the rest. She patted my shoulder, beaming. I have a really good feeling about this. And just like that, we dove in head first. Linda was a force of nature. The moment she decided on something, she moved fast. I, on the other hand, knew nothing about this kind of work, so I just listened to her, followed her lead, and did as she instructed. For a month, we worked nonstop, and then it happened. Our videos started gaining traction. People loved them, and then our first paid sponsorship came in. When Linda handed me my first share of ad revenue, I stared at the money in my hands, feeling a rush of emotions: pride, excitement, confidence. I had spent a lifetime believing I couldn't earn my own way, but now I had just made my own money. We kept at it, posting more videos, building our audience, watching our numbers climb. Linda was thrilled. Me? For the first time, I felt truly unstoppable. I had a feeling the best days of my life were just beginning. Just as life was finally settling into a beautiful rhythm, Eric showed up at my doorstep. He dropped to his knees, sobbing like a child, face pale and drawn, desperately trying to play the sympathy card. Mom, I miss you so much. Ever since you left, the whole family's fallen apart. I'm exhausted. I lost my job. Megan and I fight every single day, and now she's threatening to divorce me. She said if you don't come back, she'll leave me and take Owen with her. Mom, I have nowhere else to go. You've always loved me the most, right? Right then came the biggest joke of all. Even Dad, he said if you just come back home, he'll dump Vivian on the spot and remarry you. Mom, we all waiting for you. I couldn't help it. I laughed. What a pathetic, desperate move. Tracy had already told me everything. Their house was a disaster. Vivian couldn't stand George's bad temper and controlling ways. She was begging for a divorce, but George, he wouldn't let her go. He cursed at her, hit her, forced her to care for him, demanding she bathe him, feed him, just like she once demanded from me. No, they were nothing more than two prisoners trapped in a never-ending war. Their shouting matches shook the entire apartment building. It was glorious, absolutely glorious. I was done wasting my breath on Eric. I turned around, walked into the kitchen, and came back out holding a butcher knife. I twirled it in my hand, my voice ice cold. Get the hell out! Eric froze. He had never seen me like this before, but now I was a woman who had nothing left to fear, and thanks to our cooking videos, I had perfected my knife skills. Eric's face turned pale, but still, he refused to back down. I'm not leaving, he insisted, growing bolder. I lost my job. The mortgage is overdue. If I don't make the payment next month, the bank will take our house. You have two options. Come back with me or give me money because I'm not leaving without something. I narrowed my eyes. For a moment, I just stared at him. Then, with a sharp flick of my wrist, I threw the knife. It slammed into the wooden doorframe inches from his ear. You still not leaving? I asked slowly, my voice dangerously calm. Eric frantically shook his head. I'm leaving. Just calm down. And then, like a rat scurrying from a fire, he bolted, didn't even dare look back. But the bastard wasn't done yet. According to Linda, he had rented a cheap motel in town, determined to wait me out. He wasn't giving up, And he wasn't the only one. Linda's son? Same story. He had blown through all his money and come crawling back to her for more. We stared at each other, both feeling disgusted. Then Linda sighed, shaking her head. Clara, we can't hide forever. I frowned. Then what do we do? Linda's lips curled into a mischievous smile. Simple, we disappear. The next morning, before sunrise, we grabbed our suitcases, headed to the airport, and vanished. Our first stop? California. We had enough money. We were done working just to survive. From now on, we were living for ourselves. Eric, George, let them rot. For the next few years, we traveled across America, from the bustling streets of New York to the vast beauty of the Grand Canyon, from Yellowstone's geysers to the pristine beaches of Hawaii. And our videos, they evolved. No longer just cooking. Now we captured the beauty of our travels, the richness of different cultures, the joy of true freedom. We didn't have fixed plans. We went wherever we wanted, filmed whatever we felt like. When we got tired, we took a break. Life was finally our own, and the best part? We weren't alone. Our videos inspired thousands of people. Mais pourtant, I finally left my toxic husband because of you. For the first time in years, I feel alive. I thought my life was already set in stone at 60. You showed me that it's never too late to start over. Thank you. You taught me how to love myself. Reading their words, I smiled. Looking back, my old life felt like a distant nightmare. Once, I believed that at 60, a woman should stay home, serve her family, and quietly accept her fate. But now I knew better, because as long as you have the courage to walk away, it is never too late to start again. Years blurred into a kaleidoscope of vibrant experiences. Linda and I, the two unlikely renegades, continued our nomadic existence, our cameras capturing every breathtaking vista, every heartwarming encounter, every hilarious mishap. Our food channel blossomed into a lifestyle brand, a testament to the joy of embracing life on your own terms at any age. We became accidental icons for women seeking liberation, proving that domesticity didn't have to be a life sentence. Then came the email. It was short, terse, and unsigned. It contained a single photograph, a faded image of George lying in a hospital bed, looking gaunt and frail, a tangle of tubes snaking around him. The caption read simply, "He's asking for you." A chill ran down my spine. Despite everything, a part of me, a small, buried, almost forgotten part, still remembered the George I had once loved, the George I had vowed to spend my life with. I hadn't spoken to him or any of them in years. My heart, hardened by years of neglect and betrayal, still fluttered with a flicker of something akin to concern. Linda, ever perceptive, saw the turmoil on my face. "What is it?" she asked, her voice laced with apprehension. I showed her the email, the photograph. She studied it for a long moment, her brow furrowed. "Do you want to go back?" The question hung heavy in the air. Did I? After all this time, after all the pain, after building a new life of such exhilarating freedom, did I want to revisit the cage I had so painstakingly escaped? "I don't know," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "He's dying, Linda. Regardless of what he did, he was a part of my life for so long." Linda reached out and took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "It's your decision, Clara. I'll support you whatever you choose." I spent the next few hours in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Anger, resentment, pity, regret, a strange, almost unbearable longing. Finally, I made my decision. "I need to see him," I said, my voice resolute. "I need to see him one last time." The flight back was a blur. As the plane descended, I looked out the window, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. The city looked smaller, grayer than I remembered. The memories, long suppressed, flooded back with an almost unbearable intensity. I rented a car and drove straight to the hospital. The sterile smell of antiseptic, the hushed whispers, the somber faces of the nurses. It all felt disturbingly familiar. I asked for George's room number and made my way down the long, echoing corridor. my heart pounding in my chest. Outside his door, I paused, taking a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to face. I reached for the handle and slowly pushed the door open. The scene that greeted me was even more heartbreaking than I had imagined. George was lying in bed, hooked up to a multitude of machines, his face pale and drawn, his breathing labored. He looked frail, diminished, a shadow of the man I had once known. Eric was sitting beside him, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He looked up as I entered, his eyes widening in surprise. "Mom?" he said, his voice hoarse. He stood up and stepped back, giving me space. George stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He blinked a few times, struggling to focus. Then his gaze fell upon me. A flicker of recognition, of something I couldn't quite decipher, flickered in his eyes. "Clara?" he croaked, his voice weak and raspy. I approached the bed cautiously, my steps hesitant. "Hello, George," I said softly. He reached out a trembling hand and I took it in mine. His grip was weak, almost non-existent. I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice barely audible. "I had to," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. A long silence settled over the room, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the machines. Finally, George spoke again. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his eyes filled with a deep, abiding sadness. "I'm so sorry for everything." The words, so long awaited, hung in the air, laden with the weight of years of regret. I looked at him, at the broken man lying before me, and the anger, the resentment, the bitterness. It all seemed to melt away, replaced by a profound sense of pity. "It's okay, George," I said, my voice choked with tears. "It's okay." He squeezed my hand, his grip momentarily strengthening. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for forgiving me." He closed his eyes and his breathing became more shallow, more labored. Eric stepped forward, his face etched with concern. "Mom, he began, but I cut him off. "It's okay, Eric," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Just let me be with him." Eric nodded and retreated to the corner of the room, leaving me alone with George. I sat beside him, holding his hand, watching his breathing, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the machines. Hours passed. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room. George's breathing grew fainter and fainter, until finally it stopped altogether. The rhythmic beeping of the machines flatlined. George was gone. A profound sense of loss washed over me. Despite everything, he had been a part of my life for so long. A chapter, however painful, had come to a close. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. Then, slowly, I opened them again, a newfound sense of peace settling over me. The past was behind me. I had forgiven George, and in doing so, I had finally forgiven myself. I stood up, released his hand, and walked out of the room, leaving Eric to grieve. I had said my goodbyes. It was time to move on. I returned to Linda, to our life of freedom and adventure. The experience had changed me, deepened me. I had faced my past, and in doing so, I had emerged stronger, wiser, more grateful for the present. The food channel, our videos, our travels, it all took on a new meaning. We weren't just cooking and traveling. We were inspiring others to live their lives to the fullest, to embrace every moment, to never give up on their dreams. And as I looked out at the vast expanse of the world before me, I knew that my life, my real life, was only just beginning.
It was the annual Memorial Day barbecue in our suburban neighborhood, and I should have been enjoying the warm sunshine and the mouth-watering aromas of sizzling burgers. Instead, a cold sense of dread washed over me as I overheard a hushed conversation between Nancy Wilson and Claire Robinson. "Did you hear about Neil Morrison's shady business dealings?" Nancy whispered conspiratorially. "Rumor has it he's been skimming profits off that craft brewery his wife inherited." My heart plummeted at the mention of my husband's name. I discreetly moved closer, trying to blend in with the gathered crowd. Claire shook her head. "That's not all. I heard he's been having an affair with that young aide who works for the mayor." Rage and disbelief boiled inside me. An affair? Embezzlement? Impossible. Neil and I had been together since college, building a wonderful life centered around family values and my grandfather's cherished brewery legacy. Mom, can I have another burger? My 5-year-old son Milo tugged at my sundress, jarring me from my whirlwind of emotions. I plastered on a smile, ruffling his blonde hair. Of course, honey. Why don't you ask Dad to grill you one? As Milo scampered off to find Neil, I caught the pitying looks from Nancy and Claire. Did they suspect I had overheard? My cheeks burned with humiliation and anger. How dare they gossip about my husband behind my back? Later that evening, after putting Milo to bed, I stormed into the living room where Neil was watching TV. We need to talk. He glanced up, eyebrows raised. What's wrong, babe? The use of that sickeningly sweet nickname made me want to scream. I overheard something disturbing at the barbecue today, about you. Neil's expression hardened, eyes narrowing. What kind of rumors are people spreading now? That you've been embezzling from the brewery and having an affair with the mayor's aide. The words tumbled out in a torrent, each one slicing into my heart. For a long moment Neil was silent, his face unreadable. Then he let out a bitter laugh. You can't be serious, Lena. You're going to believe the malicious gossip of bored suburban housewives over your own husband? So it's not true? I pressed, searching his eyes for any flicker of deception. He rose from the couch, putting his hands on my shoulders as he looked me squarely in the eye. Of course it's not true. You're my world, Lena. You and Milo. I would never betray our family like that. His words should have reassured me, but a nagging seed of doubt had taken root. As I gazed at the man I thought I knew better than anyone, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was lying to me. Over the next few days, I found myself scrutinizing Neil's every move, his tardiness from work, his secretive phone calls, his unexplained absences. Each discrepancy fed the growing beast of suspicion gnawing at me. I knew I couldn't ignore the rumors any longer. For the sake of my son and my family's legacy, I had to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Little did I know, the secrets I was about to uncover would shatter my world forever. In the days following the barbecue, I was consumed by a hunger for the truth that gnawed at me incessantly. Neil's nonchalant dismissal of the rumors did little to quell my growing doubts and suspicions about who he really was. I knew I needed evidence, something concrete, to validate or refute the whispers about his misdeeds. Hiring a private investigator crossed my mind, but that felt like an extreme violation of Neil's privacy, at least for now. My mind raced as I tried to think of ways to discreetly look into his affairs. That's when I noticed his car's glove compartment looked disheveled, as if it had been hastily closed. Steeling my nerves, I popped it open after Neil left for work one morning. My hands trembled as I rummaged through its contents until my fingers landed on an unfamiliar burner phone. My heart pounded as I turned it on, watching the home screen flicker to life, to reveal a stream of coded messages. 7 p.m., warehouse on 5th. Package is secured, funds will be transferred. Need to keep this off HQ's radar. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter with each cryptic message I read. What kind of shady deals was Neil mixed up in? I felt sick just imagining the possibilities. Working late again, babe? Neil's voice made me nearly jump out of my skin as he strolled into the living room, loosening his tie. I fumbled to turn off the burner phone and stuff it back into the glove compartment. Yeah, just catching up on some emails. He quirked an eyebrow at me. Everything okay? You seem jumpy. Mustering all my willpower, I plastered on what I hoped was a convincing smile. I'm fine, just feeling a bit run down from this merger we're working on at the brewery. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but Neil seemed to accept it with a nod and a peck on my cheek before wandering off to the kitchen. That night, after Neil fell into a whiskey-laced slumber, I tiptoed to his home office and booted up his computer, my heart pounding in my ears. If he was engaging in something illegal, maybe there would be evidence on here. Email after email only deepened the pit of dread in my stomach. Communications about under-the-table payments, confidential brewery recipes being covertly shared with competitors, dollar amounts that made my head spin just looking at them. The man I thought I knew was a mirage. This emails laid bare the harsh reality. Neil was a liar, a cheat, a criminal. He had been defrauding my family's company and betraying my trust in the cruelest way imaginable. Tears stung my eyes as I finally understood the depth of his deceit. But my anguish was rapidly being replaced by a scorching anger. How dare he defile everything my grandfather built from the ground up through decades of hard work and integrity? I would make Neil pay for this. He would face the consequences for every last illicit deal, every betrayal, every moment of treachery. I didn't know how yet, but I would bring him down. No more Mrs. Nice Wife. It was time to fight fire with fire. Armed with the damning evidence from Neil's computer and burner phone, I knew I needed professional help to properly investigate the full extent of his betrayal. I kept a low profile around Neil, continuing to play the role of the doting, oblivious wife as I secretly met with a private investigator named Frank Jennings. Frank was grizzled and no-nonsense, just the type I needed to discreetly dig into Neil's tangled web of lies. We met at a diner on the outskirts of town to discuss my concerns. "You were right to come to me, Mrs. Morrison," Frank said gruffly as he pored over the emails and messages I had printed out. "This is some serious shady shit your husband is mixed up in." I cringed at his blunt delivery, but appreciated his candidness. "Just call me Lena. And yeah, it seems Neil has been very busy behind my back with God knows what kind of illegal dealings." Frank nodded, rubbing his stubbly chin. "Well, from what I can gather, we're looking at embezzlement, fraud, corporate espionage, and this here?" He tapped one of the messages. "Looks like your hubby might also be having himself a little extramarital fun, too." My cheeks burned at the insinuation. An affair? With who?" "Some young thing name of Marina Castillo. She's an aide for the mayor." The words felt like a physical blow to my gut. An affair. How could I have been so blind? Over the next few weeks, Frank gathered an overwhelming mountain of proof. Financial records, surveillance photos, witness testimonies. It became undeniable that Neil had not only been systematically looting funds from my family's brewery, but also selling corporate secrets and confidential recipes to our biggest competitors. And his mistress, Marina, appeared to be his willing accomplice and confidant through it all. One night, Frank played me an audio recording of Neil and Marina meeting at a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. Between the lewd giggling and cringeworthy pet names, my heart shattered into pieces all over again as I listened to them conspire about their next underhanded scheme. When the recording ended, tears of humiliation and rage streamed down my face. Frank sat silently, no doubt used to these kinds of emotional breakdowns from the spouses of cheaters and liars like Neil. But underneath my grief, a bright ember of fury was being stoked into an unquenchable blaze. I would make Neil regret ever crossing me and jeopardizing everything I held dear. "What now, Mrs. Lena?" Frank asked gruffly, sensing the shift in my demeanor. I stared out the diner window at the grimy street, my jaw clenched with resolve. "Now, we take that bastard down. Make him pay for every last sin." For weeks, I had been frozen by the agony of Neil's betrayal. But the time for wallowing in shock and pity was over. He had awoken a vengeful awoke in me, and heaven help Neil once I was done with him. The drive home from the diner felt like I was in a trance. My mind whirled with equal parts fury and strategy as I plotted how to bring Neil's house of lies crashing down around him. Part of me yearned to storm into the house, to hurl the incriminating evidence in his smug face, and watch the shock and shame wash over him. But I forced myself to remain calm and calculated. I needed to keep playing the role of the unsuspecting wife a little longer, let him dig his grave even deeper before I buried him in it. When I arrived home, Neil was watching TV with a glass of scotch, looking utterly unbothered. "Hey, babe, you were out late again," he remarked as I entered, putting on my best nonchalant act. "Yeah, just tying up some loose ends at the brewery." The lie slid smoothly off my tongue as I fought to keep my contempt hidden behind a placid smile. Neil grinned and patted the spot beside him. "Well, get your cute butt over here. There's still time for a little nightcap." He waggled his eyebrows lasciviously. Bile rose in my throat as I imagined him making those same lecherous overtures to his precious Marina, but I swallowed my revulsion and slinked over to cuddle up beside him, playing along with his game as I plotted his downfall. Over the next few days, I watched Neil continue his dual life of deception, smiling to my face while gallivanting around indulging his sleazy vices behind my back. The oblivious routine he kept up around me, unaware of how much I knew, was almost comical. Finally, I could take no more of the charade. I cornered him in the kitchen one afternoon after confirming Milo was over at a friend's house. "What's going on, babe? You've seemed off lately," Neil asked with a carefully measured dose of concern as he poured himself a drink. I stalked up to him, snatching the crystal tumbler from his hands and slamming it down with a crash, splattering scotch across the counter. "Cut the crap, Neil! I know everything!" He recoiled in shock before quickly regaining his composure, lips curling into a sneer. "Really? And what, pray tell, do you think you know? I know about the embezzlement from my family's company. I know you've been selling corporate secrets to our competitors. I know about your sordid little fling with Marina." To his credit, Neil barely flinched, covering his surprise with a condescending chuckle. Lena, you've really let your imagination run wild this time. This is just sad, not to mention insulting. After everything we've been through together?" He took a step towards me, reaching out to caress my cheek almost tenderly. "You're my world, babe. You have to know that. All these crazy accusations, they're just paranoid delusions." My blood boiled at his mocking, gaslighting tone. In one blistering motion, I whipped out the burner phone with the incriminating messages and hurled it squarely at his face, watching it clock him in the jaw. Neil reeled back, clutching his face and staring at me with a mask of shock and wounded pride. "You crazy bye!" "Shut up!" I roared, adrenaline and pure venom coursing through me. "I have proof of every last depraved thing you've done. Financial records, recordings, everything. So cut the innocent act, you slimy bastard." We stood in seething silence for a moment, each glaring at the other with a molten contempt. His eyes flickered with uncertainty for a brief second before hardening once more. Neil straightened up, puffing out his chest defiantly. "You think you've got me all figured out, huh? You don't know a goddamn thing, Lena." "Not really." With that vague, ominous warning, he stormed out, leaving me breathing raggedly amid the wreckage. The gauntlet had been thrown. Now the real battle would begin. After the explosive confrontation with Neil, the air was thick with tension around the house. He tried putting on a nonchalant front, but I could sense the disquiet lurking beneath his arrogant facade. For my part, I stayed coldly civil, biding my time and gathering more ammunition for the war ahead. Frank, the private investigator, had become my closest confidant during this chaos. We met frequently at our discreet diner to review the mounting evidence of Neil's malfeasance. "This is some heavy stuff, Lena," Frank remarked one afternoon as he shuffled through the incriminating financial records. "Your husband's looking at serious prison time if we take this to the DA's office." I nodded grimly, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug. As much as Neil's betrayal sickened me, the idea of him rotting behind bars gave me no joy either. I just wanted to uproot the cancer he'd planted in my family's legacy. "Actually, Frank, I had something else in mind for dealing with this dirtbag." He cocked an eyebrow quizzically, so I laid out my plan to launch a coordinated takedown at the brewery's upcoming annual gala. Neil's misdeeds would be explosively revealed before the entire community, destroying his credibility and showing everyone his true colors. "You sure you want to go nuclear like that?" Frank asked skeptically. "Public humiliation on that scale, it's no walk in the park." "He deserves that and more for what he's done," I replied, feeling my anger flare up again. "Neil has jeopardized my family, our business, our entire livelihood, all in service of funding his vices and stroking his ego. It's time he suffered the consequences of his selfish choices." In the following days, I doubled down on my efforts, coordinating an allied strike force against Neil. Longtime business partners and vendors Neil had swindled were eager to join the crusade after I presented the facts. Several employees he'd deceived also threw their support behind my insurrection, providing even more damaging testimony. On the home front, Neil had clearly sensed the shifting winds. His usual suave hubris had given way to sullenness and paranoia that he tried masking with more alcohol. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" he demanded one night as I lingered in the living room while he channel surfed. I met his accusatory glare evenly. "Like what? Like you've got some twisted scheme brewing in that head of yours?" He took a swig from his tumbler, amber liquid sloshing over the rim. I shrugged nonchalantly. "What would give you that idea?" Neil opened his mouth to retort, but seemed to think better of it, grinding his jaw sullenly before returning his gaze to the television. I watched dispassionately as he quickly drained his glass, gazing through hooded eyes at the monster I once called my husband. The gala was only a few nights away. He would finally get the reckoning he deserved, and the brewing storm would break at last. The night of the brewery's annual gala had arrived, and an electric sense of anticipation coursed through me. Tonight would be Neil's night of reckoning, after months of lies and betrayal. I had gathered an army of witnesses and co-conspirators, disgruntled employees, vengeful business partners, anyone Neil had wronged during his reign of duplicity. Frank and I had meticulously compiled all the evidence into an undeniable case that would detonate at the climax of the evening. "You ready for this?" Frank muttered under his breath as we made our entrance into the lavish event hall where the gala was being held. I gave a terse nod, scanning the milling crowd of the city's business elite until my eyes landed on Neil, holding court near the bar as always. He was all smiles and swagger, downing a glass of scotch and soaking up the attention. For a fleeting moment, a ghost of my old affection for him stirred in my chest. Then I remembered the mountains of incriminating evidence detailing his litany of sins, the embezzlement, the corporate espionage, the callous infidelity. Any empathy I felt withered on the vine. The gala proceeded according to tradition: stuffy speeches, self-congratulatory award presentations, endless schmoozing over overpriced hors d'oeuvres. All the while, I bided my time, waiting for Neil's moment in the spotlight when I would detonate the bombshell. "And what a year it's been for our hometown brewery," the mayor herself was saying as she took the stage, grinning broadly with Neil standing beside her. Thanks to our good friend Neil Morrison's outstanding leadership, the company has achieved remarkable growth and success. I caught Neil's eye from across the crowd and the ghost of a wink as he basked in the accolades. I suppressed the urge to sneer in revulsion. "So it is my privilege to present to Neil the Businessman of the Year award." The mayor began clapping proudly, the entire audience following suit in thunderous applause. This was it. I gave Frank a steely nod, and he immediately dimmed the lights as I strode up on stage, ripping the microphone from the mayor's hands. "Hold your applause," I growled, glaring out at the shocked, confused crowd. "Neil Morrison doesn't deserve any awards tonight. He's a crook and a criminal who's been robbing this brewery and this city blind." A deafening silence fell over the audience. Neil's expression morphed into one of outraged disbelief. "What is the meaning of this?" He sputtered as I unleashed a blistering recitation of the laundry list of offenses: embezzlement figures, incriminating emails, records of illicit transactions. Each salvo burrowed in like shrapnel, drawing gasps and murmurs from the gala crowd. When I turned to Neil's mistress, Marina, sitting in the front row, I saw her features contorted in horror. And let's not forget, while Neil was looting from his employees and business partners, he was also stupping around behind my back with this little hussy. Chaos erupted in the event hall as Marina burst into hysterical tears. Other audience members erupted in raucous shouts and boos directed towards the stage. Through it all, Neil stood rooted to the spot, his face rapidly cycling through a spectrum of emotions: anger, panic, fear. I locked eyes with him, letting him absorb the debilitating optics of his public immolation. After sowing so many seeds of betrayal and deception, the harvest he reaped was a bitter, devastating reckoning. Within days, Neil was under arrest, slapped with multiple charges including embezzlement, bribery, and corporate fraud. His reputation and credibility were in smoldering ruins. I couldn't deny a deep sense of gratification watching karma render its ultimate verdict on my deceitful husband. But our saga wasn't over quite yet. In the aftermath of Neil's catastrophic public downfall at the gala, the legal heavens came crashing down on him with biblical force. He was swiftly arrested and hauled off in handcuffs as the damning evidence I had compiled with Frank's help was presented to the district attorney. Charges rained down like hellfire: embezzlement, corporate fraud, tax evasion, bribery. For weeks leading up to Neil's trial, a frenzy of media coverage dissected every tawdry detail of his betrayals. His affair with Marina was breathlessly splashed across the front pages, complete with the sordid recordings Frank had obtained of their indiscreet liaisons. The brewing company's shady business dealings and the plundering of its coffers were mercilessly exposed for the world to gape at. Reporters camped outside our home, hungry for any fresh morsel of scandal from the Morrison family drama. Through it all, Neil remained defiant, head held high as he arrived at the courthouse in his expensive suits. Only the faint muscle twitching in his clenched jaw hinted at the maelstrom of panic and loathing swirling beneath that arrogant veneer. "This is a disgraceful sham being perpetrated by my unhinged wife," he snarled at a pack of reporters shoving microphones in his face. "I was betrayed and set up by someone I trusted, but the truth will come out, and I will be exonerated." His audacious use of the victim card only fueled my resolve as I took the stand and mercilessly dismantled his lies over multiple searing days of testimony. I presented the documented evidence, layer by damning layer, until his pathetic protestations of innocence crumbled to ash. Marina, his former mistress, proved to be his ultimate undoing. Likely realizing her culpability and facing potential charges of her own, she flipped on Neil in exchange for leniency. The lurid details of their affair and illicit financial entanglements she revealed had the jury visibly recoiling in disgust. "Your Honor, this man is a rapacious, narcissistic con man who shattered my family's legacy with his unchecked greed and debauchery," I declared in my closing statement, leveling an accusatory glare at Neil. "He has earned nothing less than the most severe punishment the law can deliver." Neil held my gaze for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Perhaps in those seconds, he finally glimpsed the man he had become, a ravenous, immoral shell obsessed only with satisfying his own vain desires at any cost. When the judge finally read the jury's verdict of guilty on all counts, I felt an immense weight lift from my shoulders. Justice, at long last. The emotional circus played out in hushed murmurs and camera flashes around me. But my focus was solely on Neil, shoulders slumped in defeat, as the bailiff slapped cuffs around his wrists and led him away to await sentencing. He deserved every agonizing second of this humiliation after the suffering he had inflicted on me and our family. At the sentencing weeks later, the judge took no pity on Neil, slamming him with over 2 decades in federal prison, plus millions in fines and restitution. As they hauled him off, I locked eyes with my disgraced husband one final time. He opened his mouth, perhaps to finally offer a sliver of apology or remorse. But I'd heard enough of his lies. With a curt shake of my head, I turned and walked out of that courtroom a free woman at last. The lengthy legal saga was finally over. But aside from justice served, there remained the matter of salvaging my family's brewery from the rubble of Neil's selfish decimation. With Neil's epic downfall now complete and the legal turmoil finally behind me, it was time to start rebuilding what he had so selfishly torn down. My family's brewery needed to rise like a phoenix from the ashes of his greed and deception. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work, poring over the company's finances with a newly hired forensic accounting team. The scale of Neil's embezzlement and corporate sabotage was even more staggering than I had initially uncovered. Millions had been siphoned into his secret slush funds. Invaluable trade secrets and recipes had been illicitly sold off to our biggest competitors, eroding our market share and brand value. It was a miracle the entire enterprise hadn't already collapsed under the weight of his treachery. My first priority was to cut out the lingering rot and install safeguards to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. I fired every last person, even tangentially complicit in enabling Neil's underhanded schemes. A new, if costly, corporate ethics program with robust auditing and oversight protocols was swiftly implemented. With a new, streamlined leadership team of my most trusted allies in place, we began the painful process of judicial asset repatriation, recouping as much of the stolen money and intellectual property as possible. It was a labyrinthine legal quagmire that seemed never-ending. "Don't worry, Mom, you've got this," Milo encouraged one night as I was hunched over spreadsheets, my eyes throbbing from hours of scrutinizing Neil's complex money trail. "You're the strongest person I know." My son's words were a soothing balm. He was my true north, the unblemished kernel of goodness that had survived the scorched earth of his father's villainy. I pulled Milo into a fierce embrace, realizing just how much of his childhood had been tainted by the atmospheric tension of Neil's secret misdeeds. No more. I vowed then and there that Milo would grow up witnessing the integrity and righteous resilience modeled by his mother in the wake of this nightmare. With each agonizing step forward in the long journey of restoring the brewery's tarnished reputation and fiscal solvency, I felt lighter. The shackles of denial and delusion about Neil's true nature no longer weighed me down. I had faced the hardest truths about the man I once loved and slayed those dragons. Some nights I still found my mind wandering, wondering what direction Neil's life had careened off toward behind those cold, unfeeling bars of his prison cell. I felt pity for the broken husk of a man he must have become, but any lingering hint of affection had been seared away by the betrayal and trauma he inflicted. A few years into my tenure as the new CEO, I made the ceremonial first pour of a fresh batch of our flagship IPA, using the original recipe from my grandfather's time at the helm. As I sipped the crisp, hoppy ale, the flavors carried more significance than just simple refreshment. This beer represented reclaimed legacy, righteous perseverance in the face of greed and deception, and enduring pride in doing things the right way through honesty and integrity. The brewery's annual holiday gala arrived again, always a festive source of community cheer and revelry. Except now, there were no seedy undercurrents of scandal or seething familial disharmony. Just joy, optimism, and renewed faith in the decades-old local institution that had been reborn under my steady hand. As I looked out over the smiling, celebrating crowd, I felt an immense sense of catharsis. The demons had been purged, the damage repaired. Neil's poisoned husk had been excised, and my family's true spirit preserved. It was a new dawn for me, for Milo, for the brewery's next generation of ethical, honorable leadership. My vengeance had been equally punishing and restorative, fitting justice for the man who tried to burn it all down for his own selfish vices. And in the end, I got to build it all back up stronger than ever before. The night of our 20th wedding anniversary should have been a celebration, but it unveiled a truth that shattered my world. I had planned a romantic evening, Darren's favorite meal, followed by the gift I'd been secretly saving for. But when I reached into his jacket pocket to retrieve the theater tickets, my fingers brushed against an odd rectangular shape. Pulling it out, my heart stopped as I stared at the receipt for a diamond necklace from Cedars Jewelers. Darren walked in just as I was unfolding the damning piece of paper. "What's that?" he asked casually. I could barely let the words tumble out. "When were you going to give me this?" He glanced over and paled. "Oh, that. It's not for you." The room started spinning as the implication struck me. I stumbled over to the couch, my hands shaking. You bought another woman jewelry?" Darren sighed and grabbed himself a beer from the fridge like it was just another day. "Listen, Marissa, I haven't been happy for a long time. I've met someone else, someone who appreciates and desires me." My ears started ringing as he droned on about this mystery woman. I could barely process the venomous words pouring out of his mouth. "Her name is Lena, and we're in love. I want a divorce so we can stop living a lie." I stared at him, unseeing. "After 20 years? Just like that?" He shrugged nonchalantly. "I'm sorry, but it's over. God, we'll have to split assets and figure out what's best for Ethan, of course. I'm seeing a lawyer first thing tomorrow." "So that's it?" I screamed, the betrayal and humiliation burning through me. The vase of fresh roses I'd bought for our anniversary went crashing against the wall, stemming briefly, splattering petals over the hardwood. "You just throw away 20 years without even trying to fix things?" Darren didn't even flinch. Darren, a detached look on his face as he studied his beer bottle. "There's nothing to fix, Marissa. We're just delaying the inevitable by staying in this loveless marriage." I wanted to claw his eyes out, rage and disbelief coursing through me. Who was this stranger casually destroying everything we had built? Then a new fear gripped me, cold and hard in the pit of my stomach. "What about Ethan?" I whispered, trying to regain some composure. "You can't take him from me." "Don't worry, we'll negotiate that too. To be honest, he'll probably want to live with me and Lena once he gets used to the idea." White-hot anger flashed through me again at the thought of some homewrecker trying to replace me as Ethan's mother. Screw being civil. This was war. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Darren thought he could just waltz out and discard me when it suited him. but I wouldn't go down without a vicious fight. I would use every ounce of strength to protect my son and make Darren pay for throwing away our sacred vows. He was about to learn you don't terrorize a wife and mother without suffering the consequences. The night dragged on in a blur of tears and anger after Darren's bombshell confession. I barely slept, my mind spinning over his callous dismissal of our marriage vows. How could the man I loved discard me so easily for some young tart from the office? In the cold light of morning, I got my first look at the woman he'd risked everything for, Lena. Just 28 years old, with a vapid social media presence full of pouty selfies, she looked barely older than the college girls I counseled with fake breasts and hair extensions. I felt ill thinking about Darren's wandering hands on her plastic body. Over bland cereal that scratched my raw throat, I asked Ethan if he'd suspected anything. My son just shook his head, eyes vacant from the trauma of seeing his parents' marriage implode. I longed to protect him, but Darren had other ideas. "We need to talk about living situations," he said in an infuriatingly calm voice when I refused to answer his calls. "I think it's best if Ethan stays with me during the separation." Like hell, I spat, unable to mask my fury at his audacity. "You really think parading your office mattress in front of our son is appropriate?" "Don't start with the insults, Marissa. This is hard enough." My blood boiled at his feigned concern. "You threw our family away the moment you stuck your dick in that bimbo." "Mom," Ethan gasped, clearly uncomfortable witnessing our toxic exchange. "That's enough," Darren said sternly. "This hostility isn't good for Ethan. We'll discuss custody arrangements through our lawyers." "You mean your lawyers," I shot back. "Which shark did you hire to take my son away from me?" He sighed in exasperation. "Always the drama queen." Those 4 words detonated my anger into blinding fury. "Drama queen? I spent 20 years caring for our home and child while you chased money and strange." I hurled the closest object at hand, a ceramic chicken objet d'art that Darren's mother had gifted us. It shattered against the wall next to his head. "Mom, stop!" Ethan cried out. But I was seeing red, unleashing 2 decades of resentment. "You never appreciated any of my sacrifices. Well, if you think I'm going down without scorched earth retribution, you're dumber than you look." Darren flinched as shrapnel pelted his designer shirt, finally seeing the menace in my eyes. Without a word, he strode out, letting the front door slam behind him. I collapsed onto the sofa, with his chest heaving, as Ethan stared at me warily. I was consumed by a new protective rage. Darren wanted to cast me and my son aside like rubbish? Well, he was in for a brutal awakening. I may have lost my husband and the life I'd known, but I would claw my way through hell to ensure Darren's ultimate demise, both professionally and personally. He wanted to see drama? I would become his worst nightmare, stopping at nothing to destroy him. Ethan didn't deserve to see this war. But I had no other choice now. The man I'd loved had become a soulless enemy, and by God, he would reap the agonizing consequences. I needed a plan. Some way to fight back against Darren's legal barracudas and regain control over my life. But I couldn't take him on alone. He held all the financial power after 2 decades of me deferring to his breadwinner status. That's when Grant, my older brother, stepped in as my first line of defense. "You can't let that bastard bully you out of everything," he growled after I spilled the whole sordid tale over a bottle of Cabernet at his place. We were kindred hot-headed spirits, a fact our parents lamented over frequently while we were young hotheads. "Easy for you to say," I sniffed, wiping away angry tears. "You're not the one being discarded like trash after sacrificing my best years." Grant slammed his fist on the table, those flashing eyes of emerald fury I knew so well. "That soon-to-be broke-dick loser husband of yours is out of his damn mind if he thinks he can treat you this way. We'll bury the son of a bitch in legal fees and public shame if we have to." I felt a surge of gratitude for having at least one person utterly on my side through this nightmare. I want to take him for everything he's worth. Every broke-dick penny. "That's my girl." Grant cracked a rare grin, that mischievous sparkle back in his eyes like when we used to egg houses as teens. "You let your big brother take the wheel on this one, sis. Old Darren doesn't know what he's in for." I returned a shaky smile back, feeling a flicker of hope despite the chaos. There would be hell to pay. I would make certain of that. No one abandons me without reaping the whirlwind. The next day, I got my second formidable ally when Sylvia, my best friend since freshman year of college, arrived on my doorstep. "I can't believe that scumbag is trying to put you out on the street," she fumed, pulling me into a rib-cracking bear hug. Despite her ferocity, just having Sylvia's presence calmed me. She'd been my rock during every major life event the past 20 years. And now, true to form, she had my back during this worst betrayal of all. "He won't get away with it," I assured her, feeling a surge of new resolve. "Grant and I have started making preparations." Sylvia's eyes narrowed to slits. "You're going to take that cheating sack down, aren't you?" I nodded, surprised at how little guilt I felt. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a selfish stranger. Mother was untamed. It was time to fight for my surrender. "Well, you're going to need compromat, all the ammo you can get on that scumbag," Sylvia said. "All business now. Financials, dirtbag stuff, anything we can use." She rubbed her hands together with relish. "I'm just the legal pit bull you need." She shot me a savage grin. "Darren wants to tango? Well, this bitch has a mean tango." Despite the coming war, I couldn't stop the startled laugh that burst from my lips. With Sylvia and Grant at my side, I suddenly had formidable reinforcements. Let the games begin. Over the next few weeks, we formed a united front, my own personal team of overlords. Sylvia brought her expertise as a top family attorney, while Grant worked his accounting contacts for intel on Darren's money trail. Slowly, I felt the shreds of my confidence and thirst for vengeance re-emerging. Darren could play the victim all he wanted, blaming me for our Marshall breakdown. But he was about to learn, in horrific detail, the catastrophic consequences of underestimating a betrayed woman. I would orchestrate his downfall through his own hubris and greed, those twin curses that caused his undoing. By the time I was through, Darren would not only be a broken man, but Ethan would finally see his father for the desiccated soul he truly was. At last, my son and I would gain the freedom to flourish without his black market toxicity. With Sylvia's dogged legal assistance, I started gathering ammunition for the war ahead. Bank statements, emails, text messages, anything that could expose Darren's rotten core and shady business dealings. It turned out Mr. Entrepreneurial Real Estate Man had been cutting quite a few unscrupulous corners over the years. Fraudulent property valuations, kickbacks from mortgage brokers, even under-the-table payoffs to building inspectors. Sylvia cackled with delight as she pored over the evidence. "This worm is going down harder than a drunk prom date," she assured me one evening over takeout curry. "No judge will let him keep the kids once they see what a scumbag deadbeat he is." I felt a grim satisfaction watching the box of incriminating files grow. Darren's affair had turned my whole existence upside down. Well, now I would return the favor by systematically dismantling his precious empire, beginning with his ruined professional reputation. But that night, the true scope of Darren's deceit took an even more sickening turn when Grant called in a panic. "Oh my God, Riss, you're not going to believe the filth I just uncovered about that little bimbo, Lena." My heart pounded as he recounted her long, calculated history of targeting wealthy married men across multiple states. Social media profiles revealed a sinister pattern of love-bombing men, getting them to leave their wives and families, then milking them for cash and gifts until she got bored and discarded them. Her trail of ruined homes and empty bank accounts spanned over a decade. "She's a professional homewrecker," I muttered numbly after hearing it all. The full depths of her predation on my family sank in, stoking the flames of hatred even higher. The scheming little monster. "Precisely," Grant growled, so full of disgust I could picture his face flushing crimson. "And that's not even the worst of it. Old pal from high school who works Vice sent over some police reports." As he laid out the grisly new details, my blood turned to ice in my veins. Arrests for solicitation, allegations of theft, stalking, and drug charges. Lena was far more nefarious than some harmless gold-digging floozy. "Oh my God," I gasped once he finished, my head spinning. "How could Darren be taken in by her?" "That's what she does, Riss," Grant said grimly. "She preys on weak, desperate losers going through a midlife crisis. That snake had her sights set on the next big score." I was shaking with revulsion, picturing Lena sinking her claws into my unwitting husband. For all my anger at Darren, he didn't deserve to be manipulated and discarded by a sociopathic criminal. I felt bile rise in my throat. Nobody plays with my family without suffering the ultimate consequences. We need to end this now, I said, a cold finality in my voice that surprised even me. Darren has severely underestimated who he's dealing with. There was a low chuckle on the other end. Never did like having to learn a lesson twice, did he? I allowed the faintest hint of a grim smile, despite my fury. No, he never was very bright when it came to reality checks. Well then, Grant concluded darkly, I'd say it's high time we issue the corrective before he ruins the rest of all our lives. For the rest of that night, exhaustion eluded me as my mind whirled with the new intelligence about Lena's true evil nature. Clearly, she represented a threat far more dangerous than just a passing midlife fling. She was a calculated, immoral predator, diligently working her way through every wealthy idiot foolish enough to stray. Well, I would happily become her undoing. No one destroys my family's lives without paying a butcher's ransom in return. The time had come to use every tool in my arsenal to cut out the fetid, infected limbs dragging us down. I would stop at nothing until Darren and his degenerate whore had their worlds cremated to ashes at their feet. Only then, after being forged in the flames of their arousal selfishness, would both of them finally understand the devastation they had wrought. Vengeance may be unsavory, but sometimes it's the only deterrent for such unconscionable acts. Over the next few weeks, Darren seemed to relish flaunting his new life of sin with Lena in my face. Brazen selfies and check-ins at fancy restaurants taunted me on social media. My stomach turned watching the sordid displays of Darren draping his arms around the woman who had detonated my world. But I maintained an eerie calm, secure in the knowledge that their ego-fueled bliss was willfully oblivious to the coming storm. Look at them, Darren sneered one afternoon, the first time Lena joined one of our interim custody meetings. He shoved his phone across the table, a photo of the smirking bimbo posing in lingerie splayed across the screen. Isn't she incredible? I refused to look, keeping my eyes locked on his with a withering stare. Yes, she certainly seems accomplished at her profession. Lena's heavily made-up face twisted in confusion as she opened her obliviously overlined lips. My what? Let's stay focused, Sylvia interrupted with a bemused look. She was taking undisguised glee in refereeing the humiliation that lay ahead for the gruesome twosome. Back at the house, Ethan remained sullen and withdrawn, keeping to his room and barely looking at Darren during their court-mandated visits. Infuriatingly, the affair degenerate seemed more concerned with showing off his new plaything than reconnecting with his only child. You've barely spoken to your son in weeks, I said coolly after enduring yet another long dinner disrupted by Lena's shrill, inane chatter. Darren waved a dismissive hand, eyes glassy from too much wine. He's dealing with the divorce in his own way. You know teenagers? I know betrayed kids too, I said evenly, locking eyes with the hollow shells where his soul used to reside. At least with you out of the picture, mine can finally heal from the trauma of having such a wretched, absent father. Rage flickered across Darren's face then as he realized the depths of my disgust. You smug bitch. What gives you the right to shut me out? My lips curled into a sneer of pure contempt. Still playing the victim card? That ship has sailed, asshole. Time to face the consequences of your depraved choices. Is that a threat? Lena snarled, outraged that anyone dared defy her latest married meal ticket. A promise, I hissed back with undisguised loathing. You brazen hussies think you can just take whatever families and homes you want by opening your fish holes? Time to learn some manners. Mom, please, stop. Ethan's stricken voice cut through the venom, but I was too transfixed on administering consequences to the poisonous snakes infesting our lives. You're going to regret this disrespect, Darren said in a low, menacing tone that might have cowed me years ago. I'll take everything if you force me to. I let out a bark of laughter, unable to contain my derision. For weeks, I'd allowed their circus of depravity to play out, getting them overconfident and complacent. But now their sneering, self-entitled arrogance would seal their doom. By all means, take your best shot, I said with a shrug. Nothing would make me happier than legally eviscerating you both before burning the remains. Darren's eyes widened slightly, as if finally glimpsing the full extent of what he had unleashed. I didn't bother to hide my vindictive smirk. Let him marinate in dread. It was but a faint taste of the hell to come. Sylvia slid a folder of paperwork across the table, then, still grinning. "We've prepared a preliminary asset division agreement for your consideration." As the sniveling fools pawed through the legalese, my gaze drifted to Ethan. His young face was etched with misery and resignation that no child should have to bear. It cemented my resolve. Ridding our lives of Darren and Lena's toxic effects was non-negotiable. They could dismiss me as some deranged, overly dramatic shrew for now, but soon their overconfident arrogance would be shattered. Underestimating me, a mother pushed to the brink, would be the first in a catastrophic series of errors, and I would luxuriate in every anguished second of their undoing. With each passing week, Darren and Lena's arrogance reached offensive new heights. Public displays of affection and taunting posts filled their social media accounts, rubbing my face in their debauched bliss. "Look at this," Lena crowed one afternoon, sidling up to shove her phone in my face. It showed Darren beaming as the gold-digging whore modeled a brand-new diamond tennis bracelet he'd gifted her. "Your sleazeball ex-husband has such incredible taste, doesn't he?" I fixed her with a look of pure revulsion. Yes, he always did have discriminating taste in overpriced trash. Lena's heavy makeup couldn't mask the flash of rage across her vapid features. "You're just a bitter, jealous old hag hanging on to the past." A cruel smile slowly spread across my lips. "And you're a two-bit prostitute hanging on to whatever married scumbag will leak his billfold. Isn't that right, dear?" With a shriek of incoherent fury, Lena raised her bejeweled hand to strike me. But Darren quickly grabbed her wrist, an admonishing look on his smug face. Now, ladies, let's not let our claws out in front of the boy." He shot a pointed glance toward Ethan, who was frozen in shock and embarrassment at the unseemly scene. The poor kid was being forced to witness the dregs of depravity thanks to his father's insatiable lust. "See what a degenerate bitch you raised your son around all these years?" Lena hissed through painted lips, struggling against Darren's grip. "I'll show him what a real woman is like once the divorce is final." White-hot rage lanced through me at the thought of this scorpion mother trying to slither her way into my child's life. Ethan was paying enough for his dad's mistakes without adding Lena's poison into the equation. "Over my dead body," I snarled, rising to my feet with clenched fists. "I'll bury you in litigation for the rest of your wasted life before I let you blight my son." Darren's face hardened and he stepped between us. "You're the one who made this divorce inevitable through your constant contempt and disrespect. Don't act so above it all. Your neurotic bitterness is what's destroying this family." "Enough." The shout came not from me, but from Ethan. We all turned in stunned silence as my son gestured wildly, anguish and rage etched across his young face. "I can't take this anymore. You two are the most selfish human beings on the planet. Do you have any idea what you're putting me through?" Darren made a move toward him. "Now, son, you just need to." "Shut up!" Ethan roared, angrier than I'd ever seen. He pointed a shaking finger at Lena, who gaped like an overstuffed fish. "And you're nothing more than a cheap hooker trying to buy a new family." He whirled back towards his father, wild-eyed. "And you, trading in your real family for this whore. I don't even recognize you anymore. I'm so disgusted, so ashamed of what you've become." Tears streaked down Ethan's face then, and any remaining anger melted into heartbreak. He fled from the room, unable to endure another moment of toxicity from the monsters who destroyed our family. For several long moments, an uneasy silence hung over the shattered remains of the ugly scene. I stared at Darren with a mixture of hatred and pity. This deluded fool truly had no idea the calamity he'd invited by chasing his reckless affair. Well, it was long past time I pried those scales from his willfully blind eyes. "You think this is disrespect?" I said in a low, dangerous tone. I leaned across the table, glaring straight through him. "You have no idea the world of torment I'm about to unleash on you both. Consider this a mere overture to the main event." Lena opened her mouth, possibly to shriek more indignant protests, but I silenced her with a single frigid look. "Starting tomorrow, the real games begin," I said with steel in my voice. "And by the time this is over, I'll have burned you straight through the core of your rotten, worthless souls." With that vow hanging in the air, I turned and walked out, back ramrod straight. The unraveling had officially begun. Darren and his mistress were about to reap the consequences of their despicable actions. No more Mrs. Nice Girl. From here on out, the only priority was mutually assured destruction. True to my promise, the shockwaves of my retaliation plan began rippling out the very next day. Thanks to Sylvia's tireless work, a deluge of legal motions and allegations hit Darren from every angle imaginable. First came the notices of civil lawsuits, painting him as a fraudulent real estate developer, enriching himself through graft and racketeering. A barrage of paperwork detailed inflated home valuations, kickbacks from loan officers, even bribes paid to municipal inspectors. His shady business practices, once camouflaged behind legitimate transactions, were now laid bare in painstaking detail. Next, the criminal charges started trickling in. Money laundering, tax evasion, even allegations of investment fund misappropriation. Within a matter of days, what few legitimate business dealings Darren had were frozen as authorities began seizing assets and combing through financials. The once swaggering businessman who had so casually devastated my life was now scrambling just to keep his head above water as the ocean waves crashed over him. Of course, the vulture Lena was first to cut and run once Darren's looming legal catastrophe came into focus. One sunny afternoon, she was standing on my doorstep, raccoon eyes leaking mascara, designer luggage in tow. "You did this," she wailed, blotchy face contorted with anguish. "You crazy bitch destroyed everything." I blinked at her with mocking innocence. "I'm sorry. I don't follow. My husband abandoned me, so I took reasonable recourse to protect my financial interests, completely within my legal rights." "My rights," Lena raged, stamping her foot. "I have rights, too. All of Darren's money and assets are mine now. We were starting a new life." A cruel smile twisted my lips then. "Ah, did the little gold digger's cash cow run dry? Too bad your talons couldn't sink in deep enough before we pried them out." With a scream of bilious fury, Lena hurled her oversized designer tote at me, spilling its contents across the doorstep in a jumbled mess. Then she spun on her studded heel and fled, weeping incoherently all the while. I watched her broken, despondent figure retreat down the driveway. Good riddance to that tank of tainted money and soul poison. Darren showed up later that evening, haggard and sweat-stained. He barged past me, red-faced and shaking, and started sweeping the discarded items on the porch into a box. "So is this what you wanted?" he panted, shooting me a hate-filled look. "I'm ruined, facing jail time. Is that enough justice for you?" I stared at him in cold silence, unmoved by his tantrum. For weeks, I had diligently gathered evidence of his corruption, providing a veritable roadmap for the feds to utterly dismantle his nefarious practices. And now he was reaping his deserved misery. "This is merely a down payment," I said in an arctic tone. "For every second of anguish you put me and Ethan through, I intend to excind from your flesh until you understand the meaning of the word suffering." Darren's expression flickered with a hint of worry then as my words drove home. For the first time, he seemed to truly comprehend the depthless determination behind my pursuit of vengeance. You won't get away with this," he sputtered. "I'll fight this in court. I'll take you for everything." I let out a short bark of laughter. "Oh, Darren, you sweet deluded fool, this is merely the opening salvo of consequences for your unspeakable betrayal and immorality. The body blows are still yet to come." I took a threatening step closer, eyes blazing with fury. "The utter ruination of your body, spirit, and financial empire is now an inevitability. And once you are gasping among the cinders of your miserable existence, you may yet learn an iota of the devastation your actions have caused." Darren recoiled from me then like a scalded dog, the box of Lena's hastily abandoned belongings clutched to his chest like a shield. For the briefest of moments, a flash of terror crossed his face before the mask of indignant defiance slipped back into place. "You're insane," he managed weakly. "A spiteful monster." A cruel smile twisted my lips as I reached to slam the door in his face. "No, my dear, simply a harbinger of your well-deserved descent into hell." The clang of the door closing echoed through the foyer as I walked away without a second glance. The shockwaves were still radiating outward, dismantling every facet of Darren's wretched existence, piece by agonizing piece. And I would be front and center, savoring every shriek of torment until his debt was paid in full. Only then would my own soul finally find peace. The weeks and months that followed were a legal grind, but the outcome was never in doubt. Not after I'd thoroughly dismantled every pillar of Darren's formerly comfortable existence. Arraignments, depositions, bankruptcy filings, I stalked the courthouses with grim determination, ensuring each chink in his armor was pried wider until he was left defenseless. Sylvia barely had to enter their room before judges and arbiters began sharpening their gavels for the kill. Through it all, the costly legal bombardment drained Darren's remaining assets down to husks. I watched with unconcealed delight as his expensive suits turned to rags and his prized sports cars were seized by the bank. His palatial home, the scene of countless fake idyllic evenings, was lost to foreclosure. In the end, the man who had so brazenly discarded my unwavering devotion was left with nothing but the ashes of his ruined life. Lena, of course, was long gone, just another invisible statistic among the trail of discarded married men in her wake. Darren tried negotiating, begging for mercy, even brazenly attempting to guilt me by throwing Ethan in my face. But it was far too late for that. He had detonated our sacred family unit. The consequences of his betrayal were a riptide that would sweep away every rotten thing he'd ever cherished. On the day of his final sentencing, I felt zero pity watching the husk of the man I'd once loved shuffle into the courthouse, a ghastly specter of despair in ill-fitting second-hand clothes. Greed, ego, and lust had finally caught up to him in the form of a 7-year sentence for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. "Well, here we are," he said hoarsely, head hung low in defeat. "The end of the road you promised." I said nothing, staring at him coolly as Sylvia loudly shuffled some papers beside me. "Aren't you going to gloat?" Darren's voice was barely above a croak. "Give me one final kick while I'm down." I regarded him for a long moment before speaking. "Gloating would imply I took pleasure in reducing you to this," I said calmly. "The truth is, I feel nothing but revulsion at the depths of your depravity." A tremor passed across Darren's ruined face then. "How could you ever let it come to this? We had 20 years of family." "We had nothing." My voice was ice cold. "You made the choice to sacrifice everything for selfish temporary desire and indulgence. You cast away 2 decades of my loyalty and commitment for what? A handful of mediocre orgasms and trinkets for that disposable whore?" I jabbed a finger towards him, rage resurging for one final crest. "You did this to yourself, Darren. My job was simply ensuring you understood the consequences of your depraved choices." Darren opened his mouth, perhaps to grovel or plead yet again. But a booming voice interrupted from the front of the courtroom. "Darren Michael Landis, you've been found guilty by this court of 32 counts of fraud and financial misdealing, as well as tax evasion. The people hereby sentence you to 84 months imprisonment in the state correctional system, with additional financial restitutions and penalties to follow. This court is adjourned." The gavel cracked down like a thunderclap, sealing the end of Darren's miserable chapter. As bailiffs moved in to escort the handcuffed wretch of a man away, he turned towards me with sunken, wretched eyes. "I hope, one day, you find peace." With that, he was removed through the towering oak doors, transported off to start his hard new life of imprisonment and misery. And although his words should have vindicated me, I felt nothing but hollowness inside. The man who vowed eternal love and family was forever buried. What was left was simply karma's receipt, the remorseless cost of his transgressions come due. I watched through the courtroom windows as the armored transport pulled away, Darren becoming just another inmate, number drowning in the atrophy of regret and shattered potential. It would be a long road of empty cells, indignity, and iron bars ahead. But that path was of his own making. My role had simply been the messenger of his consequences. I may have swung the final hammer, but he was the one who willfully triggered his own destruction from the start. And as I stepped out into the brisk air, ready to rejoin Ethan and return to rebuilding our new lives, I felt unburdened. There would be no more poison, manipulation, or moral bankruptcy dictated by Darren's black hole of selfishness. We were free now, and I would ensure we stayed that way for the rest of our days.